It was early morning at the hospital. A heavy silence filled the air, interrupted only by the light beeping of the machines and the occasional rustle of the curtains. Mrs. Eulalia, an elderly woman with a fragile appearance, opened her eyes slowly, as if emerging from a long sleep. She blinked several times, adjusting her vision to the gloomy surroundings of the hospital room. He wasn't sure how long he had been unconscious, but his body felt heavy and his mind was still foggy. The pain in his chest was constant, a reminder of the battle he had fought with recent heart failure. Looking around, Eulalia realized that she was alone, or at least that's what it seemed at first glance. Suddenly, soft voices began to echo from the other side of the curtain. She recognized one of them immediately, her granddaughter Marina, who was sitting in a nearby chair. The other voice, however, was unfamiliar. It was a man's voice, low and whispered, but there was something about that intonation that made Eulalia catch her breath. Something was wrong, very wrong. The tone of the conversation she began to hear was not one of simple concern for a sick relative. On the contrary, there was a charged tension in the air, a forbidden complicity that made Eulalia uncomfortable before she even understood what was being said. "I can't take this situation anymore." Marina's voice cut through the silence, full of anguish. Eulalia frowned, still motionless, without showing signs of waking up. She had heard her granddaughter sound desperate before, but not like this. There was an intimacy to the words that seemed not intended for her or the medical situation at hand. The man responded then, his voice carrying a dangerous, almost cold calm. "Calm down, Marina. Soon everything will be resolved. We have already made a decision. We can't go back now." Eulalia felt a chill run through her fragile body. She was right, there was something else going on. Every word exchanged between the two revealed that her granddaughter was involved in something serious, something she would never have imagined. Her instinct warned her to continue pretending to be unconscious. If Marina and that man thought she was still unconscious, maybe she could find out what they were up to. She slowly closed her eyes, pretending to sleep while keeping her ears open. With each word spoken, the mystery deepened. Marina seemed to be discussing something that involved some kind of plan. "I know it's risky, but we have no other choice. She's already old. So, she'll..." Marina hesitated, her voice choked, as if she were unable to finish the sentence. Eulalia felt her heart beat faster, even in her fragile condition. "What was your granddaughter suggesting?" The words, although incomplete, already painted a disturbing picture in Eulalia's mind. Were they waiting for his death? Or worse, were they planning to rush her? The man, remaining calculatedly calm, replied, "No one will suspect. Just maintain your composure and wait. We will continue as planned." Eulalia was now sure that something much bigger was happening. The combination of mysterious words and the urgent tone of the conversation made it clear that his granddaughter was involved in something dangerous, perhaps criminal. The lady struggled to keep her breathing steady without betraying herself. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, but his weakened body could barely keep up with the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind. As she listened, a feeling of betrayal and dread grew inside Eulalia. The girl she had raised and loved, who had always been her companion, was now plotting behind her back. And not just that, he was planning something terrible. But what hurt Eulalia the most at that moment was the question that burned in her heart. Why would Marina be doing this? There was a part of the story that was still missing, and she would need to discover it without anyone knowing she was conscious. He needed to remain still, continue listening and understand how far this plot extended. The sound of the man's footsteps echoed throughout the room, and the curtain was pulled back slightly. Eulalia kept her eyes closed, frozen in her immobility. She felt his presence approaching her bed, felt his cold, calculating gaze on her. Her heart was beating wildly, but she knew she couldn't give in. This was just the beginning of something much bigger, something she would need to unravel if she wanted to save herself, and, perhaps, even her own granddaughter. The man who was talking to Marina remained next to Eulalia's bed for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. She felt the tension in her own skin, as if every beat of her heart might betray her. Eulalia kept her eyes firmly closed, with her breathing controlled, pretending to be completely unconscious. That moment was crucial. If he realized she was awake, everything could fall apart before she had a chance to fully understand what was happening. After what seemed like an interminable moment, his footsteps moved away from the bed, and the curtain closed again. She listened as he sat down next to Marina again, and the conversation between them resumed. "You need to stay calm," he insisted. "The more nervous you are, the more people will realize that something is wrong. We can't give that kind of opening." Marina, her voice now firmer, replied, "I know, but it's not easy. All this happening so fast, and she's there, as if she were watching us. Sometimes, it seems like she knows more than she lets on." Eulalia's heart skipped a beat with that last sentence. So Marina was suspicious? Did her granddaughter realize she was awake? Eulalia needed to be even more cautious. The last thing he wanted was for his covers to be blown so soon. The protective instinct, so maternal, was stronger than ever. Despite the disappointment and pain of hearing her granddaughter involved in something so dark, Eulalia knew she needed to stay one step ahead. While listening in silence, Eulalia tried to organize the pieces of the puzzle in her mind. The tone of urgency in their voices indicated that they were dealing with something of great risk. But what would it be? Money? Enemies? Or something related to your own health, which was increasingly weak? Marina had always been Eulalia's favorite granddaughter, the girl who had taken care of her in recent years. But now, everything seemed to have reversed. The caring granddaughter was willing to do something that could harm her. The elderly woman didn't know what their next move would be, but she knew that the danger was closer than it had ever been. Marina then asked a question that chilled Eulalia's blood. What if she wakes up before everything is ready? What if she finds out? The man, with the coolness of someone used to dealing with difficult situations, replied without hesitation. "If that happens, we'll deal with it. You just need to follow the plan. The rest, we'll figure it out later." Marina didn't respond immediately. The silence that followed was almost deafening, until she murmured, "I just hope it works." Eulalia understood at that moment that her life, or something crucial related to it, was at stake. They were waiting for something, a plan. But what plan? She desperately wanted to open her eyes and confront Marina, demand explanations, but she knew that this could be fatal to any chance of defending herself. As long as they believed she was unconscious, Eulalia had the advantage. Now he needed to act with caution and, more importantly, patience. The man got up, and Eulalia heard his footsteps move away. He whispered something to Marina, too low for the elderly woman to hear. Then, the bedroom door closed softly, and silence took over the room again. Marina remained in the room, sitting next to her grandmother's bed. Eulalia knew that the next steps would need to be precise. Lying there, motionless, she began to plan her own strategy to find out more about what was really going on, and possibly to save her own life. The following hours were long and tense. Marina remained next to Eulalia, without saying a word, lost in her own thoughts. The silence between the two, which used to be comfortable, was now heavy and full of distrust. The elderly woman, with her eyes closed, tried to calm her breathing and control her emotions. She knew that if she maintained a vulnerable posture, she would gain more time to understand what was happening. From time to time, he felt Marina holding his hand, but the touch no longer brought comfort. It was a mechanical, empty gesture. Eulalia's thoughts revolved around what she had heard. Why would Marina, her beloved granddaughter, be involved in something so dangerous? What could have led the young woman, always so dedicated and loving, to participate in a plan that clearly put her grandmother's life at risk? The words, "if she wakes up before everything is ready," wouldn't leave Eulalia's mind. There was something big going on, and she needed to find out as soon as possible. Pretending to be unconscious was the only weapon she had at the moment, but she knew she couldn't keep up this charade for long. The hospital that morning was almost deserted. The sound of nurses and doctors' footsteps in the hallway was distant, and the constant beeping of devices brought a false sense of calm. Marina was restless. The grandmother could notice his rapid breathing and the anxious movements in the chair. Every now and then, the young woman would pick up her cell phone, as if waiting for an important message, but then she would sigh and put the device back in her pocket. Marina's nervousness was palpable, and Eulalia knew that this was the right time to observe more. As the hours passed, physical exhaustion began to take its toll on Eulalia's body, but her mind was sharp. While pretending to sleep, she meticulously analyzed Marina's every gesture. I watched how she looked at the door, how she checked her cell phone frequently. Something was about to happen, and Marina was clearly waiting for some signal. Whatever it was, it involved more than just the man she had spoken to. The question now was, how much time was left before everything was ready? Suddenly, Marina got up, walking towards the window. The sudden movement made Eulalia hold her breath for a second, fearing that her granddaughter was about to do something. However, Marina just opened the curtain, letting the pale light of dawn invade the room. He stood there, motionless, looking outside, as if searching for answers in the deserted streets. Eulalia, still feigning unconsciousness, wondered if her granddaughter was sorry or if she was just waiting for the next events to unfold. Marina returned to sit next to Eulalia's bed, and, for a brief moment, her expression softened. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered, her voice low and trembling, as if she were speaking to herself. Eulalia almost reacted, her heart tight with pain and confusion. What did Marina mean by that? "I'm sorry for what?" And why did the tone of his voice seem so final, as if something inevitable was about to happen? Eulalia would need to act soon. Every second counted. At that moment, the elderly woman realized that the time of just observing was coming to an end. The mystery still hovered over the room, but Eulalia was beginning to understand that she could no longer wait passively. Marina's words, mixed with guilt, made it clear that a choice had been made, a decision that her granddaughter had made. Eulalia knew she would have to act before it was too late, but she still needed to understand more about the plan, and, above all, about the reasons that led her granddaughter to take this path. Eulalia knew her time was running out. Although she was still feigning unconsciousness, she felt the growing urgency in Marina's behavior. Something was about to happen, and Eulalia needed to act before it was too late. But what to do? She was tied to the bed, unable to move quickly, and any mistake could reveal her secret. He decided he needed to take a risky step. Make Marina believe there was something wrong with her condition. Maybe this would delay the plan and give her time to find out more. Still with her eyes closed, Eulalia began to control her breathing more deeply, making it irregular, as if she were having difficulty breathing. It was a small trick, but it could be enough to get Marina's attention and, who knows, make her call for help or change the course of whatever was happening. She heard her granddaughter immediately approach the bed, her breathing labored, worried. "Grandma, is everything okay?" Marina's voice was anxious, and that gave Eulalia hope. Marina didn't seem indifferent to her well-being. For a few seconds, Eulalia didn't respond, continuing to breathe heavily. Finally, she slowly opened her eyes, pretending to be confused and weak. "Marina," he murmured, his voice hoarse and low. The granddaughter came even closer, her eyes wide, as if she were being taken by surprise. "Grandma, are you awake?" he asked, trying to hide his nervousness. Eulalia nodded slowly, forcing herself to appear more fragile than she really was. It was essential that Marina believed that she was still vulnerable and unaware of what had happened before. Marina, visibly nervous, pulled out her cell phone again and took a few steps to the side, starting to type something quickly. Eulalia realized that the message must be for the man with whom her granddaughter had conspired earlier. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The plan depended on Eulalia's health, and her awakening could have advanced or delayed something crucial. Now, more than ever, the elderly woman needed to find out what they were planning, and do it quickly. "How do you feel?" Marina asked, trying to sound worried, but there was a palpable tension in her voice. "I'm weak," replied Eulalia. Using the real weakness she still felt as a shield to not reveal that she was more aware than she let on. "What's going on? How long have I been like this?" The question was subtle but necessary. She needed to hear more. She needed Marina to deliver something without realizing that her grandmother was paying attention to the details. You were unconscious for a few days? But everything is fine now, Marina replied, without going into much detail. Marina's vague tone and short answers indicated that she was nervous, trying to keep the situation under control. Eulalia noticed the hesitation in her voice and the fact that Marina avoided eye contact. The granddaughter was hiding something, and increasingly, the elderly woman was certain that her own recovery was being closely monitored to ensure the success of a terrible plan. Eulalia, now alert, began to think about how she could use that moment to her advantage. She needed to keep Marina under surveillance, but at the same time buy more time. If he could find out more about the plan or delay it, perhaps he could find a way to escape the trap that was forming around him. Feigning fragility would be her cover, but she needed to act before Marina and the mysterious man moved on to the next phase of whatever they were plotting. In the following minutes, while Marina was still at the bedside, Eulalia noticed that her granddaughter was becoming more and more anxious. The young woman's breathing was irregular, and her gaze kept darting to the door, as if she was waiting for someone to arrive or for an important message. Something in her behavior began to crumble. Eulalia knew that if she kept up the pressure, Marina would end up slipping up, and that was what the elderly woman needed. In such a critical situation, any scrap of information could save his life. Suddenly, Marina's cell phone vibrated in her pocket. She glanced quickly at the screen and frowned, as if she was trying to interpret something. The elderly woman, maintaining her weakened posture, observed everything carefully. Marina got up and, without realizing that her grandmother was discreetly watching her, she started talking on the phone in a low tone, but enough so that Eulalia could capture parts of the conversation. Yes, she woke up. No, I don't think she noticed yet. Yes, we're still in control, said Marina, pacing nervously around the room. Eulalia's heart raced. What did Marina mean by "we're still in control"? It was clear that her recovery was not good news for her granddaughter's plan. But now, more than ever, Eulalia needed to find out what this control really meant. The phone conversation continued, with Marina repeating some instructions that the man on the other end of the line seemed to give. All right, let's go with what we discussed earlier. I'll call you when the time is right. When Marina hung up, a heavy silence fell over the room again. Eulalia kept her eyes half open, trying to look tired, while her mind worked quickly to connect all the information. She knew that Marina was waiting for something. Perhaps the right moment to act, perhaps a signal to begin a new phase of the plan. Her granddaughter's behavior showed that decisions were being made in real time, based on Eulalia's health status. The elderly woman decided that she needed to advance her questioning game a little further. Marina, what's happening? I feel like there's something wrong. Marina, who had her back turned, paused for a second before responding. He turned slowly, forcing a smile. Grandma, it's okay. You just need to rest. But her voice trembled slightly. Eulalia knew she had hit a weak spot. She had planted the doubt, and now Marina was holding herself back from falling apart. Marina approached and, with a hesitant touch, adjusted Eulalia's pillows. I'll be back in a bit, Grandma. Rest, please. Eulalia, maintaining her fragile expression, nodded slightly. As soon as Marina left the room, the elderly woman let out a deep sigh. She had learned enough to know that the plan was unfolding quickly, and she needed to act soon. Alone in the room, Eulalia began to plan her next move. As soon as Marina left the room, Eulalia was finally able to relax a little. His heart was still racing, and his mind was working frantically, putting together the pieces that were beginning to fall into place. There was a plan afoot, and his granddaughter was directly involved, perhaps as a reluctant participant, but undoubtedly aware of what was happening. However, a crucial element was still missing. What was the true objective of this plan? Was it something related to Eulalia's health? Or was Marina being manipulated in some way by forces greater than she could control? With Marina out of the room, Eulalia knew she needed to act quickly. He didn't know how long it would be until his granddaughter or the mysterious man returned. Even in her weakened physical condition, she forced herself to sit up in bed. The effort was immense, but the adrenaline pushed her forward. I needed to find out more about what was happening, and I felt like the answers were there, somewhere in the room. With difficulty, He reached for the nightstand next to the bed, where Marina had left her cell phone. To his surprise, the device was still there. Marina's phone could be the key to unraveling the mystery. Trembling with nervousness and effort, Eulalia picked up the device. She knew she wouldn't have long before Marina noticed her absence. His shaking hands began to slide across the screen, trying to access the latest messages. It wasn't easy for Eulalia to handle that type of technology, but with determination, she managed to open the list of recent messages. There, she found an intense exchange between Marina and an unknown number. With no name saved, just a few numbers. The messages revealed more than Eulalia expected. In recent days, Marina and the mysterious man had exchanged several messages about the plan, always mentioning a final decision that was about to be made. The most recent messages spoke directly about Eulalia's recovery. If she wakes up, we need to act quickly. The doctor is ready. All that's left is your confirmation. The doctor? Were they planning something related to Eulalia's treatment? Any interventions that could be used against her? The elderly woman felt a knot form in her stomach. The feeling of betrayal by her own granddaughter grew even more, but now it was accompanied by concrete fear. They were willing to do something to her, possibly with the help of a doctor. Could it be possible that his own recovery was being sabotaged? Eulalia didn't know what to think, but she was increasingly convinced that she needed to act quickly before it was too late. However, before she could delve even deeper into the messages, Eulalia heard footsteps approaching in the corridor. Quickly, she turned off her cell phone and placed it back on the nightstand. He barely had time to lie back on the bed and close his eyes before the bedroom door opened again. Marina entered, now accompanied by a man in a white coat, probably the doctor they were talking about in the messages. Eulalia, once again, had to feign fragility. But now, she knew that time was running out. Eulalia felt her heart race when she saw the man in the lab coat enter the room. He had a neutral, professional expression, but his gaze passed over her in a way that made Eulalia feel even more vulnerable. Marina, beside him, was more nervous than before, as if the doctor's arrival was a sign that something important was about to happen. Eulalia, although anxious, maintained her fragile posture, trying to appear completely vulnerable and unaware of what was happening around her. The doctor approached the bed, checking Eulalia's vital signs. His hands were precise and quick, and he barely looked at Marina as he worked. But Eulalia noticed something. He was avoiding any eye contact with her. He seemed to know that his patient was awake, or at least conscious enough to realize what was happening. She still looks weak. We need to be careful, he commented, without looking directly at the elderly woman. Marina nodded, trying to appear calm, but her nervousness was evident. And when are we going to make the decision? Asked Marina, breaking the tense silence that filled the room. The question was filled with anxiety, and it made Eulalia's heart stop for a moment. The decision. They were discussing something serious, something that involved his life. The doctor, however, did not respond immediately. He made a few more adjustments to the devices next to the bed and then turned to Marina. Soon. We still need a few more tests before proceeding. But don't worry, we're on the right track, he replied, with a frightening coldness. Eulalia began to understand that she was in more danger than she imagined. The conversation between Marina and the doctor made it clear that there was something to be decided regarding her health. Something that not only involved her well-being, but that seemed to be part of a larger plan. But what was the end goal? Did they want her to get worse? Or perhaps there was something in her treatment that was being manipulated so that her health status did not improve. When the doctor finished adjusting the devices, he turned to Marina, murmuring something that Eulalia couldn't fully hear. But it was enough to realize that they were close to a crucial moment. Tomorrow will be an important day, he said, casting a quick glance at the elderly woman before leaving the room. Marina stood there, next to the bed, biting her lip, clearly disturbed. Eulalia needed to act quickly, but she still didn't know how. As soon as the doctor left, Marina sat down next to the bed again. I didn't want it to be like this, Grandma, she whispered, her eyes teary. But we have no choice. It's the only way. Eulalia, still pretending to be unconscious, felt a mixture of sadness and fury. The granddaughter, whom she loved so much, was convinced that this plan was the only way out. But exit from what? And for whom? Marina's anguish revealed that, in some way, she believed she was doing what was necessary. Maybe she was being manipulated, or maybe she truly believed that Eulalia's sacrifice was the only path to something greater. But the elderly woman could wait no longer. The manipulation game was about to intensify, and she needed to find a way to unmask this plan before it was too late. When Marina left the room, silence reigned again, but the weight of the revelations did not let Eulalia rest. Now, with more information in hand, the elderly woman knew she needed to make a decision. She could continue pretending to be weak and try to buy more time, or she could take action, confront Marina and the doctor in some way. Any choice he made now would come with great risks, but the idea of simply waiting for the final decision was unbearable. Eulalia, no matter how weak she was not willing to be a passive victim. Lying in bed, Eulalia reflected on everything she had discovered. It wasn't just a health issue. It seemed like there was something deeper involved. Marina, with her words of regret and confusion, seemed trapped in a moral dilemma. The doctor, on the other hand, was cold and methodical, someone who would not hesitate to make any decision to fulfill his role. What could motivate Marina to follow such a risky plan? Was it a financial issue? Some kind of pressure that Eulalia didn't know about? Deciding to fight, Eulalia began to plan her next steps. I knew I didn't have enough physical strength to leave the hospital without help, but there were other ways to resist. I needed to find someone trustworthy within that environment. Perhaps a nurse who was not involved in the plan, or a hospital employee who could go unnoticed by Marina and the doctor's manipulations. The only thing clear to Eulalia was that time was against her, and if she didn't act quickly, it could be too late. In the following hours, Eulalia continued to observe every movement inside the room. Every nurse who came in, every shift change, she paid attention to everything, looking for some sign that she could trust someone. The physical fatigue was immense, but the determination to survive was even greater. She knew that Marina would return soon with further instructions, and when that happened, Eulalia needed to be prepared to take definitive action. The challenge now was to find the right moment to act. The night seemed endless, and the constant beeping of devices around him was a cruel reminder of his fragility. Even so, Eulalia felt that she had something stronger, the desire to survive and discover the truth behind Marina's actions. No matter what it took, Eulalia knew she needed to fight for her life. Finally, when dawn began to appear through the window, bringing a soft light to the room, Eulalia felt a new inner strength. I knew time was running out, but I also knew I wouldn't face this alone. The courage he had built over the years, facing so many other battles in life, was back. She would not be defeated easily. Now all that was left was to wait for the right moment, and when it arrived, Eulalia would be ready to confront the truth, whatever the cost. The next morning brought with it palpable tension. The soft light that came through the window did not calm the turmoil that was growing inside Eulalia. She knew the final confrontation was about to happen. Marina would return soon, and, together with the doctor, would make the final decision. Eulalia needed to act before it was too late. She still didn't know exactly what the plan involved, but it was clear that something terrible was at stake, something she couldn't allow to happen. While waiting, trying to remain calm, Eulalia analyzed all her options. He had decided that he would confront Marina directly, but he knew he needed to choose the right moment. Any error could trigger a dangerous reaction. She considered calling for help, but the doctor's presence and the power he seemed to have within the hospital made Eulalia suspicious of anyone involved with the treatment. She was isolated, and the only person she could face directly was Marina. Perhaps, in one last emotional plea, she could bring her granddaughter back to the right side. Marina arrived shortly after dawn. His steps were heavy, and the nervousness in his expression was even more evident. She didn't seem as confident as before, which indicated that she was feeling the weight of what she was going to do. Marina's gaze was empty, as if she were trying to emotionally detach herself from the situation. Eulalia, seeing her approaching the bed, decided that this was the moment. Without hesitation, the elderly woman opened her eyes, looking directly at her granddaughter. "Marina, what are you doing?" he asked in a firm voice, but full of pain. Marina froze. The shock on her face was unmistakable. She clearly hadn't expected Eulalia to be awake, much less to be conscious enough to confront her. "Grandma, I," she stuttered, not knowing what to say. Eulalia's accusing look completely disarmed her. "I know you're involved in something, Marina. I know you're planning something against me. But why? I raised you with all the love in the world, and now you're going to betray me like this," continued Eulalia, her voice overwhelmed with emotion. Marina lowered her head, visibly shaken. "It's not like that, Grandma. You don't understand. I didn't want things to come to this. They forced me to do it." Marina's voice was fragile, and her hands were shaking. "I was in financial trouble. I was pressured. And when this man came along, he offered a solution. He said there was a way to solve everything. But I never wanted to hurt you. I just thought that it would be best for everyone." Eulalia felt a mixture of anger and compassion rise within her. "The best for everyone? Marina, you are being manipulated. They are using you for something much bigger and darker than you can imagine." Eulalia's words hit her granddaughter like a blow. Marina looked close to tears, torn between what she had done and the guilt that now consumed her. "I don't know what to do, Grandma," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You can choose now, Marina. Choose to help me. Choose to do the right thing before it's too late," pleaded Eulalia, trying to reach her granddaughter's heart. Marina looked at her grandmother, her expression of despair clear. The internal conflict was evident in her eyes, and for a moment, Eulalia felt that she could save her from this terrible decision. Marina still had a chance to redeem herself, but time was running out, and the doctor would return soon. Marina remained silent for a long moment, the weight of her decisions reflected in her blank gaze. Tears streamed down her face as she internally struggled with the gravity of what she had done. Eulalia knew that the choice her granddaughter would make in the next few moments could seal the fate of both of them. "Marina, please. You can still get out of this. Help me. Let's face this together," said Eulalia, extending her hand in a gesture of hope. The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway announced the doctor's arrival before Marina could respond. The man entered the room with a calculated look, ignoring the emotional conflict evident in his granddaughter. He approached the bed, not knowing that Eulalia was already awake. "It's time," he said coldly, ignoring Marina's silent presence. "We need to move forward with the plan." Marina took a step back, as if her own mind was in a fierce battle between what she knew was right and what she believed was her only way out. Eulalia, realizing that the confrontation was inevitable, stared at the doctor. "I know what you are planning," she said, her voice firm despite her physical weakness. The doctor stopped, his neutral expression turning slightly surprised but still emotionless. "I'm not as easy to manipulate as you think. Marina is not to blame here. You manipulated her," accused Eulalia, trying to bring to light the dark side of the plot. The doctor stepped forward, maintaining his composure. "You should have remained unconscious," he said without changing his tone. "This whole thing would have been easier." Eulalia realized at that moment that the man had no intention of backing down. He was cold, methodical, and would not hesitate to follow through with the plan. However, he underestimated something: the emotional battle Marina was waging. The young woman was on the verge of a choice, and that invisible tension in the air would make all the difference. Marina, pressured by the gravity of the situation, took a step forward, finally decided. "No, I can't go through with this," she said, her voice firmer now but still shaky. "I won't let you hurt my grandmother." The doctor looked at her, an expression of irritation beginning to appear in his eyes. "Marina, think about what you're saying. You know what's at stake here." But the young woman shook her head, more sure of her decision. "I'm not going to do that." The outcome happened quickly. The doctor, realizing that he had lost control over Marina, advanced towards Eulalia's bed, but was stopped by his own granddaughter, who, in a courageous move, placed herself between him and her grandmother. "I won't let you hurt her," he repeated, this time with conviction. Eulalia felt profound relief, but knew they were not out of danger yet. The doctor, furious, retreated, knowing that the plan had failed. He gave Marina a disdainful look before leaving the room without saying a word. Marina, now sobbing, turned to Eulalia, who was watching her with eyes full of relief and understanding. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I almost did a terrible thing," the young girl confessed, tears flowing freely. Eulalia, despite everything, smiled softly and shook her granddaughter's hand. "You made the right choice. That's what matters." Marina nodded, feeling the weight of guilt still on her shoulders, but knowing that she had, at least, avoided the biggest tragedy of her life. Now, the two needed to rebuild their lives and, together, face the consequences of what almost happened. The road to redemption would be long, but, at that moment, the most important thing was that Marina had chosen to protect the one she loved most. And, in doing so, she had saved herself.